The Mideast, machine guns, and revenue numbers. Yeah, we're going to talk about it all this morning. Metro News Talkline is underway.
Do not attempt to change the station. You are surrounded.
We interrupt this program to bring you an emergency news bulletin. Repeat, this is an emergency bulletin. Keep your radio turned on.
From the studios of WVRC Media and the Metro News Radio and Television Network, the voice of West Virginia, comes the most powerful show in West Virginia. This is Metro News Talkline with Dave Wilson and T.J. Meadows.
Check set line up, link. Activated Telos telephone. Switch network control from Charleston to Morgantown.
Stand by. Q Dave and T.J. You're on. Metro News Talkline is presented by Encova Insurance, encircling you with coverage to protect what you care about most. Visit Encova.com to learn more.
Good morning. Welcome inside the Encova Insurance Studios. If you're tuned in on one of our great radio affiliates across the state, we appreciate you. If you're watching on Metro News Television or Facebook Live, YouTube, we appreciate you as well. Phone number is 800-765-TALK, 800-765-8255. You can text the show at 304-TALK-304. Zach Karolchek is handling the video stream this morning, and Sophia Wasik is on the audio side of things today. Coming up a little bit later on, we'll hear from Revenue Secretary Eric Nelson. We'll get the February revenue numbers. Brooke County Senator Ryan Weld stops by. We'll dig into the Senate Bill 1071, allowing machine gun sales in West Virginia? Question mark. Also, Brad McElhaney, the latest under the Capitol, will give you the details about the upcoming fishing, hunting, and outdoors sports show here in Morgantown that is slated for this weekend. With all that, say good morning, T.J. Meadows from the Encova Insurance Studios in Charleston. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dave. I could not sleep Friday night into Saturday morning. I don't know why. I just couldn't sleep, so I decided to get up, went to the fridge, grabbed something to drink, turned the television on, and there's the president talking about Iran. And I stayed up and watched the news. Just surreal, something to see, something to watch. Definitely historic for a number of reasons. So a lot of things happening in the world, my friend. A lot of things happening.
Yes, there are. Of course, you're referring to Operation Epic Fury, is what this has been deemed. A continued U.S.-Israeli air campaign striking command and control sites, air defense systems, missile facilities, and targeting the Revolutionary Guard as well. Robert Bolton is a friend of the show. He's a political science professor at Fairmont State University, and this is an area that he is well versed in. And he joins us on Metro News Talkline this morning to try to add some context to these world events. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Dave. Good morning, TJ. I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
We don't have time to do the entire 50 years that have led up to this, Robert, but kind of put into context how we arrived at this position where the Trump administration made the decision to go ahead and commence military operations against Iran.
Well, it's important to remember, if you look at our relations with Iran since 1979, when the Shah was overthrown and the Islamic Republic was installed, our relations with the Iranian regime have ranged from icy to Arctic cold. There's never been a period where we've had particularly good relations with them. And Donald Trump, starting last year, had a fairly successful bombing campaign when he attacked their nuclear reactor or their nuclear facility. And now the administration is claiming that the Iranian regime was posing an imminent threat to American personnel in the Middle East and in the broader world, and claims that this bombing campaign is both an attempt to overthrow the regime and neutralize their ability to project kinetic force abroad.
Robert, do you feel that the administration's aims, whether there was imminent threat or not, can be justified through the history of the relationship? You talk about proxy war, proxy terrorism with Hezbollah and other organizations. Had it reached a point where enough was enough?
Look, I should be very clear. The deceased leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khaemeni, was a bad guy. This man, if you go and walk the grounds of Arlington, you'll see dozens, possibly even hundreds of American soldiers who were killed because of his and the Iranian regime's support of militia when we were in Iraq. With that being said, I personally have deep reservations about whether or not this bombing campaign will achieve its objectives of overthrowing the regime and completely neutralizing the threat of Iran in the long term. I'm reminded of that famous phrase of David Petraeus during the Iraq War, "Tell me how this ends." Yes, you've decapitated part of the leadership of Iran, but the regime appears to continue to be functioning. Yes, there have been some protests in the street, but you do not see any mass desertion by military personnel. And Iran, while it's only killed a few American military personnel thus far, and I should be clear, that's a tragedy, we haven't seen the regime overthrown yet. Bombing campaigns historically by themselves have not been able to overturn regimes. There's a great book by a scholar named Robert Pape called Bombing to Win that was published in the mid-1990s that reflects on a lot of this, if any of your listeners are interested in reading a good book on it. But generally, bombing campaigns alone will not be successful.
Talking to Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University political science professor, about Operation Epic Fury. By the way, President Trump is scheduled to speak at 11 o'clock this morning and is expected to address the operations to this point. Robert, broader picture here just a little bit. How closely do you suspect Russia and China have been watching the negotiations with Iran and how the U.S. would respond?
Oh, I think they're watching this extremely closely right now. It's important to remember that Iran, China, and Russia are formally all allied through the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, but also they are, as a practical matter, anti-democratic regimes. And they really, at this point, Iran is the only substantial military power in the Middle East that could be classified as a relatively close ally of either country. So the Chinese and the Russian governments are looking at this saying to themselves, okay, yes, the Ayatollah has been killed. That's for them a disappointment, but they're probably saying to themselves, if the regime stays in power, there's a very strong chance that we'll actually push out any relative moderates within the upper echelons of the government and will radicalize it and sponsor closer ties with the Russian and Chinese governments. Likewise, if it would be overthrown, that would be the Iranian regime would be overthrown. That would be a disaster for them. But they are probably looking at the potential here that if the U.S. would put ground forces, you could potentially see the American military bogged down like it was in Iraq. And certainly, at least for the Russians right now with their troubles in Ukraine, that would be a welcome distraction for American policymakers for the Russians.
Professor, Donald Trump is a polarizing figure. I wrote today in the commentary at wvmetronews.com, he's often narcissistic, he's crude, he's sometimes short on the truth, that among many flaws. I do have to ask the question, though, if this would have been undertaken and led by a president who's seen to be more traditional, more presidential than Donald Trump is, would we be having the same level of conversations throughout the country as we're having today?
No, to be honest with you, I don't think so. I wasn't necessarily going to bring this up, but one thing throughout this bombing campaign that has come up in my mind as a parallel is what happened in Libya. Muammar al-Gaddafi, the former dictator of Libya, gave up his WMDs in 2004. And then in 2011, the Obama administration engaged in an aerial bombing campaign against him. In that case, there was, much like the criticism being leveled against Trump right now, there was no meaningful congressional authorization of that. You never had a authorization for the use of military force or a declaration of war. Yes, there was some criticism of the administration's approach, but that was more of a strategic and a tactical level rather than a legal argument. I will admit, I think because Donald Trump is such a polarizing figure, people who already would have had reservations under the best of circumstances feel uninhibited in unleashing their vitriol against him.
Robert Bolton joining us, Fairmont State University political science professor. Already, Robert, We have heard comparisons in the media, social media, analysts comparing this operation to 2002, the Iraq War that lasted for 20 years, the long-term nation building. President Trump says, no, that's not what we're going to be doing here. I believe Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said something very similar to that. But are those comparisons apt this early in the operation?
I do think we have to see what the administration's approach will ultimately be. I'm not jumping the gun and saying, oh, yes, we're going to be bogged down in a quagmire in Iran. But there is such a thing as mission creep. You start out bombing, then you say, okay, we're going to put a limited number of military personnel on the ground. And next thing you know, you have 100,000 boots on the ground. So I don't think it's unreasonable at this point. Yes, we have not put a ground invasion in, but I think it's better that you're having these conversations now about the wisdom or the practicality of a ground invasion before you get started. That's much better than the administration announcing, hey, we're going to invade in a week, and the government, the military, the American people being caught flat-footed about that when it's already been decided. So I don't think it's unreasonable to have these conversations right now. I think the American people, when you look at the polling data, there is definitely some exhaustion and some wariness about putting extensive contributions of military force abroad at this point. So I don't think that that's an unreasonable conversation to have. And yes, while, like I said, the parallels thus far are not equivalent to Iraq, it's more of a Libya, maybe a former Yugoslavia situation, I do think we need to have these conversations at this moment.
Democrats are talking about the War Powers Act. Republicans are saying, look, the president hasn't violated the War Powers Act yet. He has up to 60 to 90 days, depending on interpretation. Looks to be a vote coming in Congress. There's also this question, Robert, about whether or not the War Powers Act is even constitutional. I would eagerly await your thoughts on those matters.
Well, every president since Richard Nixon vetoed the War Powers Act, and his veto was overridden, has claimed that the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. I personally do happen to share that opinion as a matter of constitutional law. Assuming for a moment that it is valid, basically the president can engage in military projections abroad for 30 days. Then he can get an extension for another 30 days. And then if there is no approval by Congress, he has to withdraw them in ensuring the protection of American lives with an additional third 30 days. So about 90 days in total is what a president could theoretically get away with under the law. In reality, what you've seen, though, is presidents have taken the War Powers Act as basically a dead letter. During the Obama administration, when we were in its second term, when we were bombing the Islamic State in Iraq and in Syria, what the Obama administration would frequently do is they would send out fighter jets or bombers and would say, okay, we initiated a bombing campaign and the use of force at 10:06 a.m. on April 30th. And then operations ended at 11:30 that same day. And they would basically hit the reset button each and every time. Notably, Congress has by and large abdicated its role as the ability to declare war since World War II. And it hasn't, be it Republicans or Democrats, heavily pushed back in either instance. So the fact that we're even having a debate right now about a potential war powers resolution, in my opinion, is a promising turn. But I'm going to not hold my breath on seeing any meaningful assertion of its constitutional powers by Congress in the near future.
Robert Bolton, Fairmont State University political science professor, friend of the show. Always appreciate your input, Robert. Thank you very much.
Hey, no problem. Enjoyed it, guys. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. This is Talkline on Metro News. We're back in a moment.